Hi, my name is Reverend Carol Kema. Welcome to Thoughts of a Shaken Pastor Season 4. In this season, we've been talking to people who are successful both in their career lives and in their spiritual life. You know, every person needs that one person who's like their older sibling, the person that you can look to, up to, and run to. And so today, it is my extreme pleasure to introduce to you my friend, Jemimah. Welcome.
Thank you, and thanks for having me, Pastor Carol.
So I grew up up country, and that so most of my very young age, that's where I was. And then after a couple of years, we started following my father all over the country because he worked in the provincial administration. And so he was working in different stations, different cities. And so we pretty much, would go wherever he went. And then after a while, I guess the moving around became too much, particularly for our academics. So we got put in a boarding school. And so I was in a boarding school for actually pretty much all my life of schooling. And so primary school as well as high school. And then at a pretty young age of 13, my father passed on, which was a very unexpected event. And that shook my life, our lives actually, but let me talk about myself, shook my life. And so, but mom stepped very, very well into the role of being a single parent. And so from the age of 13, mom brought us up and did an excellent job.
So we is you and your sister?
My sister and I, so we are two in the family. I'm the second born. I do not call myself the last born. I'm the second born, so we are two in the family, yes.
Okay. So your mom was a career person or she was into business?
My mom was a career person. She was a midwife. Actually.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So she worked, I remember when we were young, she was still working as a midwife. And then after a while, she resigned so that she could stay with dad wherever he went. Yes. And that time we were all in boarding school.
Were your parents Christians?
No, well, they were churchgoers, but not believers at the time. Mom is now a believer. Not born again believers at the time, but mom is now a born again believer. Actually, it is her salvation that paved the way for my own salvation. Oh, wow. When I was in Form 2, I think, is when she got saved. And then thereafter, when I was in high school. No, actually, when I was in university. And then I got saved.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you went through primary school and high school.
Yes.
And then you met the Lord in university.
In university, in my first year at university. Yeah, so I studied law. So it was during my fourth term. We used to call it so the law students and engineering students used to have 4 terms in university. So it was during my fourth term, all alone in my room. I was reading a book called 18, No Time to Waste. I've been looking for that book since then. I can't find it. Actually, maybe I haven't looked hard enough. And so I was reading about that book, and I was reading that book, and it really touched me. And it was about this young lady who's 18 years old and how she came to Christ and how her life really made a difference. And so when I read that book, I felt compelled to give my life to Christ, which I did alone in my room. But then I became an underground Christian. I didn't tell any of my friends. Now, what is really surprising is that a lot of my friends were Christians. Actually, pretty much all my friends were Christians. But then I hadn't made the decision for Christ. But you see, I was that person who'd go to church with them, go to fellowships and all that.
So they kind of assumed.
So they knew I wasn't, but then it was very comfortable for me to be their friend because I spoke their language. And so when I gave my life to Christ, surprisingly, I didn't even tell them. But then a few months later, a friend of mine who was in my class invited me to a retreat by Campus Crusade for Christ International. That's Life Ministry. So I went for a weekend retreat, and that is when I really now made the decision, came out and decided that I was going to live for Christ. And so I was discipled by Life Ministry. And that started my journey as
and
a
Life
Christian.
Ministry have done a lot of good work in universities.
Amazing. So it's Life Ministry and the Navigators. So all my friends were navigators. Then I was in Life Ministry. So it was wonderful just for us now, together being serious believers.
And by that time, your mom was already a believer?
Oh, yes. My mom was already a believer. And my aunt, my mom's sister, who is really my spiritual mom, she also played a really big part in my being a Christian. Actually, after I gave my life to the Lord, the first person I wanted to be told after mom was my aunt. So she played a big part, both my mom and my auntie.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then immediately after I came to Christ, the first person I led to Christ was, guess who?
Who?
My sister.
Oh wow.
Yes.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So that was
so
lovely.
yeah. So all of you now are in the
all
same
of us,
boat.
yes.
Were you and your sister in the same boarding school, in primary school?
Everywhere. I followed her everywhere.
Back at high school?
Even university. So
Oh
she was
my.
a class ahead. So I went wherever she went. The only departures we had was in careers. So she did, the international, what is it called? Government and sociology. Then I went into law. But basically we're in the same schools.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So at least it wasn't too bad.
No. And we're very close. Still are very close. You know that.
Yes.
Still are.
Very, 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 very close.
Yes.
Let me ask, when you look back at growing up, what were some of the things that like spoke to you, like made you want even to do law or stuff like that?
That's a really good question because so my father had a very strong influence on my life. So Dad and I were very close, and I take his personality. So what you see of me mostly is Daddy.
That's what your dad was.
Yes. And so he was very keen on me being a doctor. And so can you imagine me as a doctor? So for the longest time, I thought of myself as a doctor because Daddy wanted me to be a doctor. Not because I wanted to, but because that's what Dad wanted of me. Parents, listen to this. And so after Dad passed on, I felt that it was my responsibility to ensure that I became a doctor. Now, during our time, I don't know whether you're of that generation, but we used to pick subjects which you were then going to follow through into university. So I wanted to pick the science subjects because I wanted to be a doctor, but I was terrible in sciences. I was really weak in sciences. But the headmistress, God bless her heart, at the school that I went to, Loreto High School in Muru, she said, absolutely not. You're not taking sciences. So you have to do the arts because that's where you're strongest. And so my mom had to be called into school because I was adamant. And together, they convinced me to do the arts.
Because you're feeling like you're letting down your dad.
I was feeling like I'm letting Dad down, which is, I know he had he intended it well, but you know how as a parent you can have such a strong influence on your children. And so I try my best not to push my children in a certain direction. Anyway, so after that, my dreams of being a doctor were dashed. I thought, okay, now what do I want to do? And for some reason, law just became that thing I wanted to do. The one thing I was certain I did not want to do was education. I knew that I do not want to teach. And at that time, I thought, oh gosh, now I know I can't teach. What should I do? And law seemed really attractive. But then I wasn't sure that I'd get the grades. But I said, you know what? Anyway, I'm going to pick law. And God is faithful. I got the grades and I did it. So I had said if I didn't get into law, I would go into social work, which I still think I would have done. What I'm doing right now in my career has a bit of that as well. So that's how I got into law.
It's so surprising to hear you say that you were afraid you'd make the grades because I've always figured you must be such a smart cookie.
Yeah, but I've had to work hard. Really, I can't say that I'm the kind of person who things just come to them
quickly, easily.
No.
Yeah, wow.
No.
So you go to campus, you study law, you get into law school, you finish that, and did you ever practice? Did you ever think of starting your own farm? How did you do that?
Yeah. So after university, one thing I was very certain about is that I wanted to work for the government because I felt that was the best place for me to get legal experience. So I applied for a job at the state law office, and so I started off as a state counsel in the civil litigation department. And I think that's what was a really good decision that I made there. And so I did that as a state counsel. And then after 3 years, I thought, you know what? I just couldn't take it. I'm the kind of person who likes to see things moving. And for me, it wasn't moving. So you'd start, you'd be given a case file, and 2 years down the road, you still even haven't gone to trial. And I couldn't take that. So I started to get very frustrated. And so I thought, you know what? I'd love to go because I loved litigation. I think I was pretty good at it. So I thought, you know what? I'd like to do litigation. I'd like to open my own law firm, but I don't have enough money for that. So let me go look for another job in the corporate organization, make some money, and then I get back into open my own legal firm. And so I started applying for jobs, and as God would have it, I found myself, working in the bank. I got a job in the bank. And so with the idea that I was going to be there 3 years, 14 years down the road, I was still there.
Still waiting to make enough money.
I guess at that point I was like, you know what, I like what I'm doing. And so there ended my desire to go into private practice. So I just stayed in the bank, moving from one role to another. Yeah.
So it's interesting because my first job was at the bank.
Yes.
And one of the things that I found so difficult was the whole culture. It was very, I don't want to say anti-Christ, but I think it was very material, very plastic. I found it very plastic. And so it was quite a challenge, I'd say, for my faith. I felt like I was like the thumb always sticking out. How was it for you? Was it easy to practice here? You're a new believer, you're young, you're single, you have a good job, and you've been gotten to the den of mangangis, all due respect to my banking friends.
Yeah.
So how did you manage your faith?
Yeah. And you get that sort of atmosphere in any part of the corporate world, right? Including even in some Christian organizations.
Yes.
Even church. Yeah. So I wouldn't say that I actually enjoyed it because I was practicing the law. So I'm very passionate about law. I honestly feel the Lord led me, although at that time I was really not a believer as such, and so not praying for God's leading into what career choice to make. But I believe that the Lord led me to law because I love it. I loved it, and so seeing what I was doing, lot of variety. So I really did enjoy it. And then again, after a while, within the law, still moved to a different role. And then after a while, still a different role within the bank. So that sort of managed the boredom and, just in this rut. In terms of how did I manage my faith, I had a very, very good support from church and very good Christian friends who we held each other accountable. And so that, for me, I think, managed that. I thank God that even at that young age, I was pretty clear about the fact that Christian values were something I would not compromise. So that was never an issue for me. And even within the bank, we had a fellowship, so a lot of Christians. So that, again, was not really an issue. I love working with my hands. I really do. Actually, I'm thinking of something new that I want to do. So if anybody's out there and they know how I can get someone to teach me how to paint, tell me, because that's the next thing I want to learn. So I used to bake from a young age. I picked it up from school, in the home science clubs class. And then I started teaching myself how to bake. And then after a while, sitting under the ministry of one of my spiritual mentors, the wife of Pastor Dennis White. Those of you who might know him, we used to call her Sister White. So she taught me how to bake and decorate cakes. And so I used to do wedding cakes. Yes, anybody want a wedding cake? Mm-hmm. I used to do birthday cakes and all that. And I actually started a business. Oh, wow. So when I was working at the bank, I would be doing all these cakes, over the weekend, for my friends and people who they would tell they'll talk about my skills, so I'd do that. And then as well, and on top of that, when I was in law school, I started teaching myself how to make clothes. And so I would go to school in town that taught me how to make clothes. And so I used to make clothes for myself, for my sister, just basically for me to wear, not a business. So I loved doing that. And that's how I would relax, doing cakes, making clothes. And then I also picked up knitting. I'm still knitting up to today, by the way. I love knitting. So now I'm looking for the next thing to do, which is painting. So I need someone who will teach me how to paint. And you did soap? Oh yes, I did soap, but that was little, not much, not much.
To design a flower.
Yes, all sorts of things, yeah. So anything to do with my hands, I love. I love being in the kitchen, I love cooking. So just anything creative, I love to do.
And that's amazing because, you know, when someone meets you the first time, you're like this really serious career person, feedback, and you're like, oh, wow, she looks so tough. But then there's this part of it that's very soft and very feminine and very, I just like being a mommy and a wife. So tell us a little bit about Pastor, my brother.
Your brother. So let me start with where I met this brother of yours.
Yes.
The other thing is I love to sing.
Yes.
And so I was in the church choir, and I met, actually we did not meet in the church choir. We were both singing in the church choir. That's where we knew each other. And then after a while, he went to Bible school.
Yeah.
And suddenly I was like, where did he go to? I don't see him anymore. But not because there was any interest, but
Just
I
a
just
brother.
realized, okay, brother has gone to
With a
Bible
nice
school.
baritone.
Brother with a nice baritone has gone to Bible school. And then after a while, when I went and started working at the bank, actually I was still working at the bank, he one time came to minister at our morning devotion. I wasn't at that particular one. There must have been something occupying in the office, but one of the ladies who was in the same church and in my department, I guess wanted to earn a bit of points. He asked, oh, by the way, Jemimah works here, right? Yeah, let me take you to her office. And so, you know, she brought him to my office, and we just started chatting. And then we're like, oh, well, so I asked him, what are you doing? Oh, Monday's my off day. Okay, so next Monday, why don't we go have lunch? And that's how it started. And before we knew it, one thing led to another. We were dating. Before I knew it, boom. I was living my life, but I was also beginning to feel the pressure because a lot of my friends were getting married. And it came to a point where people younger than me also were getting married. It came to a point where at one point I was actually invited to go and cut the cake at a wedding of a younger person, and I thought, oh my gosh, now
I'm not going to be that spinster
I'm
auntie.
going to be that person now who's going to be cutting cakes in people's weddings. And I said to the Lord, you know what, God, I really feel that I'm at that place where I want to get married. One thing I can say for a fact, that's me having a conversation with the Lord, is that I'm not going to get married to somebody who's not a believer. Yeah. That's not to say that I had not had the temptation to do that. I had, and pressure as well. And thank goodness I had no pressure from home. My mom was absolutely fine with me staying with her for the rest of my life. I said, no, Mom, that's not what I want. I want to get married. And so I was beginning to really get to the place where, Lord, when? And so by the time he came, a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine, so I had two prayer partners. We used to pray together, and we began to pray for husbands, you know. And one particular time, I remember my friend and I, who, you know, we started to pray, and we sort of gave God an ultimatum. And we said, God, you know, enough is enough. If by such and such a time, we need for you to have given us husbands. And the most surprising thing is, both of us, he gave us husbands at the time that we had asked him.
Wow.
Can you imagine? So when Patrick came into my life, I was already praying. And I had got to the place where, because before, I would be praying but telling the Lord what I need. But I come to the place where I told the Lord, I want a husband on your own terms, not on my own terms. And I think it's at that point when I was ready and fully submitted, that's when the Lord brought him around. Because I'd been praying for a deep Christian. And then the Lord decides to give me a pastor.
Yes.
I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't
Sasa,
expecting
you're a
that.
pastor's wife.
I wasn't expecting that. But anyway, that's what the Lord did. And
How was that for you? Because now you're a career person. Yes, you're a very serious Christian, but you've decided, you fell in love with this man, and he happens to be the pastor, so now you're the pastor's wife. Did you ever feel pressure? How is the life of a pastor's wife?
oh, a lot of pressure.
Tongue in cheek.
I know. Who's asking? A lot of pressure, because at the time, now you're really lucky, because this is a different time, I can tell you, Carol. Yeah. At our time, there was and particularly because the church that we ministered in, so Patrick was ministering, Muturi was ministering in Nairobi Pentecostal Church, and it was led by missionaries, the whites, and so the wife was, you know, basically doing ministry as well,
Yes.
supporting the husband. So the model that was there was that of you support your husband in ministry.
You're
That was the
pastor, you
expectation.
quit and you become the pastor's wife as a career.
As a career, and you know, so you're basically being called as a pastor's wife. And so here I am, an executive, loving my job, successful. I was really
And feeling
successful
called.
and feeling called for that, because that's what I was doing in the marketplace, right? And so then, of course, the eyebrows are being raised. And then I was also very, still am, independent minded. And so they're looking at me, and it's just not measuring up at all. And my concern initially about getting married to him was, now, is he going to expect me as well to be the kind of person that I'm not? Is he going to those long dresses? I'm sorry, nothing wrong with the long dresses. I wear them now. But sort of the expectation that you would be very mellow, which I am certainly not. I am opinionated. I'll tell you what I think, you know. And that's how God created me. And so I was concerned that people would misunderstand that. And so one thing that liberated me, he said, look, I am the one who's marrying you. So I understand you. I love you exactly the way that you are. Be you. Don't try to be who you're not. And it was challenging initially because I could see the disapproval, particularly in the older women's eyes. Not so much the men, the older women. I would choose what meetings to go for and what meetings not to go for. And they would already have chosen for me what I need to do, where I need to go.
What you need to say, how you need to act.
Yeah, exactly. Fortunately, at the time, Muturi was a youth pastor. So I got lost with the youth, which was super, because they understood me, they took me the way I was, and that sort of helped me with the transition, so that by the time we began to minister to the big church, as we used to call it, by that time, it was all good. I had gotten used to it.
And people had gotten used to you.
And they had gotten used to me, to my style. They got to appreciate that I'm who I am. They saw my heart, you know. And it's interesting you said earlier that I have this tough looking exterior, which is absolutely true. But Muturi will tell you that I have this softness inside, which many people don't see. I don't know whether it's because I don't let them see it, or whether maybe I should do something different. But that's
I think it just happens. I remember I was told by somebody when we were at ICC, she said, you know, you have this face that says, if you've got nothing to do, don't do it here. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, I mean, what do you do? Is the face you're given, you just live with it.
Yeah.
And if somebody takes the time, then they get to know.
They get to
and
know
I think
you.
when you're willing to be yourself, then you also set people free to be themselves.
Exactly. And so I kept telling the younger pastors' wives who came after me that, oh, well, I think I guess I beat the path for you. You know, so for them it was much easier to just be career women.
And it's so much easier when you start with the young people.
Exactly.
They're much more, I think we're much more accommodating when we're younger, and then we get very stuck in our... It was so scary for us when we were coming here, Jemimah.
I can imagine.
In fact, let me tell you something.
Yeah.
Sylvia took me to buy all these hats.
Oh, my word.
Because now I was going to become a pastor's wife, I needed to look a certain way and behave a certain way. And I never wore. They're just stuck somewhere.
Yeah, you just have to be yourself. And then, I mean, you like me the way I am. If not, actually, it's not my problem. It's yours. So deal with it. Yes. As long as you're not being obnoxious, as long as you're not being rude or proud, but you're just being who God created you to be, I'm comfortable.
So how did you ever get to that place of being so comfortable? You know, knowing that people have this expectation of you, knowing that you're never going to meet everybody's expectation, but sticking true to that which the Lord had called you to do, and looking for the approval of God. I remember when I came, you told me, you know, sometimes, and you're an administrator as well, that we are called to sweep. We are new brooms that have to sweep clean. And people don't like the broom, whether it is the actual broom or it's the broom, you know, the people who have to fix. How did you get to the place where you would be comfortable and say, you know what, I cannot always explain myself, and with time they will learn where I'm coming from?
I think part of it is my personality. So there's nature and there's nurture. There's the place where you know what it is that God has called you to do. There's a job that you have to do. And there are certain things that you have to do in that job. And it's in knowing that what I'm doing is the right thing, as long as you're not being malicious, but you're doing what needs to be done. So I think that part has helped me a lot. But a lot of it is in my personality. I don't get too flustered about people thinking negatively about me. I don't get too caught into wanting people to like me too much. Everybody wants to be liked to a degree, but I will not compromise my values and standards for the sake of, popularity. And so I'm pretty much comfortable in my own skin.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And that's a gift.
I
think
guess
there are
so.
people who live all their life and never get to that point.
Oh, dear. Yeah. Well, I guess I should thank God for that. Mind you, I do have moments, like all of us, right? Where you're like, maybe I should be a bit more, change a bit, But then I know I'm doing what needs to be done. And particularly as an administrator, where, there's certain things that need to be done, you have to do them. Somebody has to do them. Somebody has to do them.
So you get married to Patrick and you start a family. Looking back now, what are some, because it's not always been great. Here you lost your dad, that was difficult. You had to go to boarding school, that was difficult. You had to wait a little bit longer to get married. But what are some of the difficult moments in your life and how have they shaped you to become the person you are today?
Yeah. So one of the really difficult moments is when we lost our baby. So we lost our child when he was just 6 months.
Was that the first baby?
That was the second one, and that was cot death. That's the most horrible thing that any parent ever wants to go through. And so we were actually, visiting mom, up country, my mom. And so I put my baby to bed, go to the sitting room. We're just chatting with mom and Muturi. And then we go to bed. And all of a sudden, Muturi calls, Jemmy, come. What's wrong? And then he's holding our baby. And the baby's lifeless. I have never, ever gone through such a shocking thing in my life. That was really tough. I asked God, why? Why would you do this? I had lots of questions. I sank very low. Fortunately, I did not get to the place of losing my faith. I got to the place of questioning God. And I remember one time I was coming from a meeting. At that time, I used to work for CITAM.
So you're already first and foremost working for the church?
I'm working for the church, married to a pastor, and I'm like, okay, God.
Trying to live this faith.
Yes, trying to live this faith. And I remember I was coming from a meeting. So the defining moment for me through that whole situation was I was coming from a meeting at around 9. We used to have pretty late meetings, around 9. And then, this sadness just hit me. So I was in the car by myself. I closed the windows and I was driving and I started wailing. And I'm not talking about that pretty crying, the wailing, that whole thing. And I'm shouting and wailing and speaking audibly, loudly to God. And I said, God, how can you do this to me? How can you? Why would you give me a baby and then within 6 months take him away? And honestly, Carol, I almost can tell you it felt audible. I heard God tell me, what did you prefer? Did you want me to keep him until he was 12 and then take him away then? I don't know why he picked on 12, And I was like, oh, okay, God, I rest my case. And that began the healing. When I realized that, what, God is sovereign. And there's a reason why he would do what he does. I don't know why he did it. And so that baby, we had adopted him. And all I remember is that at the funeral, it was huge. NPC Karen, the church was packed to capacity. That is the biggest CITAM church, was at the time. And as the testimony of our baby was being given, what testimony would you have for a 6-month child? But would you believe it? There was the kids, wrote all these little nice words, the kids in the neighborhood. And so I remember after that, there was even, I understand, something that was discussed on Hope FM, and a lot of people started to adopt children. So if that was the only reason why we were given, he came and then went, I guess that was it. But that was one of the darkest.
So you worked in the church for how long?
I worked in Sitam for 3 years. So I had taken a 3-year contract. And then as the contract was coming to an end, I knew in my heart that I had accomplished what the Lord wanted me to accomplish. That I knew for a fact, because what I had done, as soon as I started working there, the Lord had led me to write down all the things that I want to accomplish after about a month of just getting to understand the ministry. About a month or two. So I wrote down all the things that I wanted to accomplish in a 3-page. I'm a very weird person sometimes. What led me to do that, I have even no idea. But anyway, I felt that I needed to. So I just keep focused. Now, 3-page document. And so as my contract was coming to an end, I thought, oh, let me just go back to that document and see what I've done. And I ticked off every single thing, everything. And so I said, you know what, God, this is what you wanted me to do. I've done it all. If I stay on, I feel I'll be spoiling an already good thing. I really feel I need to move on. I don't know where. And Muturi and I began to pray, my husband. We began to pray. And within a week of us beginning to pray, I get a call from World Vision. That time it was Vision Fund. That's where it started, the microfinance subsidiary of World Vision. And they said, oh, we're looking for someone to come and start governance for us. Would you be available? Would you be willing? And that's how it started. And I said, what? God, within a week? That was quick. But you see, I was ready. But at the same time, I was also willing to stay on if that's what the Lord wanted. Yeah.
So Donald, you had learned about ultimatums, mapema.
Oh, wow. I had learnt my lesson.
And you're still with World Vision? I
am still with World Vision. So I started on with Vision Fund, like I said, which is the microfinance subsidiary of World Vision. I did that for about 5 years in the governance department. And then after that, within that time, the current, well, not current job, but the job that I then got into became vacant. The person who was there left. And so I was asked whether I was interested. It's a long story, but long story short, after a year, again, of battling with the Lord and telling the Lord, God, it's thinking I'm not good enough for it. Are you sure, Lord? Because now I was going to be working. Yes, because now I was going to be working for the president and thinking, if I mess up at that level, there's nowhere to go. It's there or out. And I was like, God, no. And so for a year, I struggled with the decision until finally the Lord pushed me to a corner. And I remember telling Muturi, oh my gosh, I'm really feeling pushed to this. And he said, could you just genuinely with an open heart pray about it? And I genuinely with an open heart prayed about it. And as I normally do, I fleeced before the Lord. And I was very sure that's what the Lord wanted me to do. So that's how I found myself in that role, which then has changed sort of somewhat over the years, and that's where I am still today.
That's what you do. So looking back at your whole career, what are some of the things that you look at and say, I'm glad I got to do this? I mean, what are some of the success things that you point out for yourself and say, this one I'm proud I did, or this one I feel the Lord, that this made significant difference?
To be honest, I would narrow it down to just one thing, and that is a decision at a very early stage in my life, young age, to follow Christ. Because every single thing that has followed from that is because of intentionally living a life where I've told the Lord, you know what, I'm not going to try to do things in my own way. Although, of course, from time to time I have done, but pretty much saying, I will follow where you lead. And I look back and some of the things I see, I look back and I'm thinking, how did I ever even get to this and then to this? And I see that my life has weaved. There has been a path, weaving. And so I was here because the Lord knew that I needed to go here. Then I was here and so it's like a stepping stone all the way. So I'd say that's one. And full dependence on the Lord, because I have had some pretty tough and sensitive jobs. And the Lord has really helped me in those. So honestly, Carol, I cannot say that there's anything that helped me to be successful, if one can say that, assuming even that I am. But it's more that I just give myself up to God. And God just pretty much
one decision at a time.
One decision at a time. Some of them not even my decision. Some of them God's decisions, because I look at the job that I'm in today. I didn't apply for it. I didn't apply for the job at Vision Fund. The Lord just said, okay, now this, I didn't apply for the job at Sitam. So it's the Lord just saying, okay, now this is the next move. And then I'm like, oh, okay, how did I get here? And then, okay, this is the next, oh, okay. It's just been that way, to be honest. And just telling the Lord, okay, I'm here. Just show me what's next.
And what have been the ouches, the thing that like, oh, if I'd walk back, I'd do this different?
I'd do this different. So one, I would be more gentle with myself. I'm a super achiever. You know that, right? Is that a secret? I don't think so. I believe that if you're doing something, do it well. So I push myself hard. I have pushed myself hard over the years. Sometimes probably too hard, and been too tough on myself, too hard on myself. Almost expecting perfection. We were talking about perfection earlier. And when I don't attain, I beat myself up. Why didn't I do that better? Why didn't I do that better? So over the years, I have learned, hey, take it easy on yourself. You're human. It's okay. It's okay to fail. It's okay not to get things exactly how you wanted them. So yes, be gentler with myself for sure. The other thing that I would do is I'd be more intentional in smelling the roses. You're sometimes you forget that, and to an extent I have, especially before I got married, before my life sort of stopped becoming my own. We do a lot of fun things, but then as you get married, then you get the children, then you get married. Of course, you have a husband, you get the children, you have a career. It's sort of like your life gets sucked into other people's lives. You're the pastor's wife, so you don't have Saturdays. At least in our church, we didn't have Saturdays. There's always something happening. Definitely don't have a Sunday, And then Monday you're back. In fact, I used to tell Muturi, I need to have that day off that you pastors have, because I've been, but then because of who I am, some of the Saturdays I'll just not go for those pastors' wives things, and I'd have to rest. And then you have children, and so it's pick, drop, do this, do that, and then cook for the family, and so I sort of lost my identity in my children, and it ceased to be more of my life, more of their lives. My husband, my child, the church, the office. I would be more intentional in having me times. I haven't had enough me times. And even up to the other day, I was being challenged by one of my nieces. Remember, auntie, when you had your birthday and you spoiled yourself and you went to the spa, you need to do that at least every month, And so I'll definitely do more of that. I'm trying that now, but still not where I should be, but I'm trying that now. So we have two boys. We have Mahodo, who's 22 in college. And then we have Aiden, or Gishangi, who's 15, just about turning 16 actually. He's in high school, and they're lovely boys.
How have you managed? Because I know you spend quite a considerable amount of time with them, and yet you're a very, very busy person. How have you managed?
Yeah, so my job requires quite a bit of travel. And so I have had to be very intentional that when I'm not traveling, I spend as much time as I can with the family, which means that other things in my life have had to suffer, such as attending certain meetings in church. Fortunately, we're not the lead pastor, so I know it's difficult a bit for you. And so choosing, even in terms of social engagement, which ones do I do, which ones do I not do? So sometimes people might misunderstand and think this one is just being antisocial, doesn't want to come for our functions. But for me, it's just I have to be intentional about what do I do outside the family. And when I'm with the family, I just have to be present with them. Because even when I'm working from home, it's still a lot of work, because I have a very broad role, broad function that functions that I oversee. So it requires a lot of time commitment also in the office. What really helps me as well is that my office is in my home. Well, sometimes I'll work a little longer than I should, but at least it's easier. I'm not fighting traffic or whatever, so I can nip in and have maybe a meal with somebody or just have a chat when they are leaving the house. We can have that chat when they come from school. I'm there, so it helps that I'm the ever-present mom in the house.
Yes.
Even when I'm in the office, I'm still at home.
And with kids, sometimes it's just knowing you're available.
Yes. So like for instance, our younger, actually all of them, they'll come from outside, and each of them will just pop into my office. Oh, hi, mom. Shoop, and then gone. Bye, mom. I'm leaving. Just that presence. I'm there, and it's interesting when I'm not there. I understand they'll come and ask our house help. Oh, mommy is not home, and then when I'm there, it's not a big deal. They're not gonna come and talk to me anyway. It's just knowing that mommy's in the house.
It's not like they wanted anything.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just knowing mommy's in the house. So. Yeah, and then there's some designated times for family. So we have dinner together, unless my husband is in school. So and when he's not, then we'd have dinner as a family. And dinner, no phones. Nobody's allowed to use their phones at table. And when somebody sneaks in, I'm usually the prefect. Sorry, phone off. And then we would spend Sundays is our family day. So our Sundays we are together. So we might go have a meal or just hang around in the house. And then every so often what I do is that I'll spend time, with the kids separately, just to catch up with what's happening in their lives. Yeah.
So looking back to that young girl, that 13-year-old girl who was feeling so lost, having lost her best friend who's her daddy, and all this far that the Lord has brought you, what would you tell that girl?
Oh, wow. I tell that girl that, God has you. Even when you don't understand why things happen, He's still there. He knows the pain you're going through. He has a plan for your life. At that time, I didn't know the Lord, but the Lord I can still see God's fingerprints, even at that age, all over my life, guiding me from the 13-year-old to the 19, 20-year-old when I came to Christ. So God has a reason. And my favorite verse has always been Romans 8:28. That all things work together for good for them that love the Lord, them that have been called according to His purpose. And so I know at that time I didn't love the Lord, but I have seen through my whole walk how God has used even the most difficult situations for His own good. So I'll tell that little girl, God loves you, God cares about you, because at that point I questioned whether God really cared. I would sit on the side of the house and look at the grave. As from our part of the country, the graves are in the compound, and so I'd be looking at the grave and I'd be talking to my dad, and many times I wouldn't believe that he's dead. I would think, well, that's not him, they buried. I would still be waiting for him to come home. That's how much grief I had in me. And for the longest time, I'd even dream that he's come back home. And then I'd wake up and, oh my gosh, it was just a dream. And little did I know that my sister used to have the same dream. So I'd say, you know what, God has a plan for your life. And He did have a plan for my life, but I couldn't see it then. And I keep thinking, and I'll tell that little girl, that sometimes God will do things that are very, very painful, because He knows that unless He does that, He will not be able to accomplish the purpose that He has for you. And I think that if Daddy had stayed on, of course I'd have loved for him. Even now I keep thinking, oh, I wish Dad would see where I'm at now. And I wish he'd meet Muturi. I think they'd have just been great friends with Muturi. They love bananas, both of them. So they'd have been eating bananas together. He'd have loved my kids. He'd have been a great grandfather. And so, and I keep thinking, if he had stayed on, I probably wouldn't be where I am, because I would be depending on him, but not depending on God. And I think God needed. So just telling that girl that sometimes difficult times do come, but God knows why, because He has something even better for you than what you're losing.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Jemimah. Romans 8:28, it all works out for our good.
It does.
When we love the Lord and when we are called according to His purpose.
Yes, and it's about perspective as well.
So what would you like to be remembered for? I always ask myself this, what do I want them to write at my epitaph? What would you want them to write at your epitaph?
She made a difference for Christ.
She made a difference.
Yeah.
She made a difference for Christ.
Yeah. And she fought the good fight, and she kept the faith.
Oh.
Yeah.
And maybe you're watching us and you're in that place where you have to make some tough decisions. It pays to stand for Christ. You fight the good fight and keep the faith. Thank you so much. It was such a privilege.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
so honored.
I enjoyed it, actually.
Amen. And may
Thank
the
you.
Lord expand your territory.
Amen.
And may He bless your children.
Amen.
And bless and establish the works of your hands.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
You can be successful and navigate it well. You know, we are always accused that as Christians, we are so good when things are difficult. And then when God blesses us, it's like we're unable to hold the blessing, but that's not true. And so if you've learned anything from this season, it's simply this, that you can stay true to faith, no matter where you are, no matter what you're going through. It is possible because we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us.
Amen.
God bless you and have a lovely week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.